Hello, I'm Sora Luxon, and this is Magic Lesson number 71. Do it, don't talk about it. Very important to every occultist, this principle that we do the things rather than say them, that we're actually taking action rather than just speaking about taking action. And this is really more of an update for the delay in making a lesson last week than it is, say, a podcast magic lesson for this week. There have been a lot of fires in California recently. They're actually still actively burning. Some of these fires from 2 weeks ago, they're not yet contained, and then we have new ones. These are historic, record-breaking, massively catastrophic warming trend lightning strike caused fires. Not the normal sort of forest fires you see every 50 years, 100 years, even 1,000 years. As someone who's very much in tune with people who know a great deal about nature and whose knowledge spans generations from that background, and these are fires in even microclimate rainforest areas, which is what the redwood forests of the Santa Cruz Mountains are. The sequoia, the sempervirens, that's actually a rainforest. That's a place that remains so damp year round that no matter how much lightning hits it, there are parts of it that have never burned. It's simply not how it's evolved to be. So as a person in California right now, and if you're here, you know this, but I myself spent a healthy portion of my youth growing up in that beautiful tree country of Highway 9, and then spent my young adulthood all over the San Francisco Bay Area when not traveling nationally and internationally and doing other things. And then moving further out into areas beyond San Jose and Vacaville and now even Sacramento for my businesses. Being a landowner, a business owner, a human being within California right now, I can tell you firsthand and accurately that we have never seen damage like this before. I can tell you energetically, there is not a person who relies on some of these enchanted groves. I don't know what else to call them. They're sacred spaces and their power is rich. There is no one that is going to do a ritual in those areas that have survived after this that is not going to feel the energetic influence of what we've lost, that is not going to feel the sting of what's burned when they go back to those places to do their rituals. Not in my lifetime or the 2 generations preceding it have we seen something like this. And there is hardly anyone left in this particular state who isn't either directly affected by something they own or care about burning to the ground, or who has an immediate connection if they were lucky enough somehow to be out of a fire zone. They're going to have someone who's now relying on them, who's seeking their goodwill and service in their time of need because a friend or a family member has been displaced, evacuated, looted, or somewhere has lost everything. And even if somehow you haven't been affected, you don't know anyone who's been affected, you're completely isolated from the social stratosphere of any interplay relationship with any other human being nearby. If you're in California, you're still being affected because you're being forced indoors by what is, no joke, noxious and, depending on the day or hour, often toxic levels of smoke outside. I'm talking about you need a hazmat suit rebreather. Your eyes are going to sting. If you're out there for more than 5 minutes, you're going to start to choke. Walking through a burning building as it rages on fire around you type smoke. This isn't smog, right? This isn't, I smoked too many cigarettes at lunchtime, now my throat hurts. I'm talking about inhaling microdetritus of ash directly into your lungs. Depending on where you are, what time of day, where you are in California, and how the wind shifts. That's what's going on here. So to say things here at every level of society, whether you're in a burn zone, trying to actively run from fire, or if you're outside of one and you can't breathe outdoors because of the fires, functionality at the human level within this entire area has been slowed down and interfered with entirely. While I myself constantly need to keep abreast and prepared each day to move further again out of the fire zones. If you're someone that's never seen this sort of a thing, never been in an area that might be evacuated due to fires, you wouldn't know, but you keep what's called a bug out bag. It's basically this emergency bag that you leave near a door or an access or egress point, where if suddenly a fire comes raging towards you very quickly, or if you're told to evacuate a zone for whatever reason very quickly, you'll have a bag that'll have your passport, maybe some important financial documentation, IDs, maybe some money, water, foil blankets. It's an emergency bag. It's what do you have to get out of your house or where you're staying and get somewhere else if you suddenly become a refugee. So pretty much everyone around here is keeping that bag and has now moved it from 1 or 2 places into 3 or 4 different places over the last 2 weeks. You grab this bag and you run. Even people who weren't at first affected by the fire and had people come stay with them who were, now everyone then has to move even further out. You can see it's this domino effect. I have dear friends in Vacaville and Boulder Creek and Ben Lomond and Felton. I used to work at the Brookdale Lodge these are people within the state that have suffered losses that require my dropping everything to be present for them in this moment. So no, on top of I myself having to stay safe and keep as much as I can safe of my own resources, I also have quite a few other people that are depending on me for help at this time. So there wasn't a lot of Magick lesson YouTube podcasting last week, and I don't have a lot of time for it at the moment. But that is the lesson this week. My explaining to you my last 14 days or so of silence and why I'm so busy now, that is the lesson. That I'm doing these things rather than talking about them. That we, as functioning strong occultists, remember our priorities as energy workers. Our obligations to our fellow beings. Everything's a circuit, everything's a circle. So our obligation to each other first and foremost in times of need. My not doing a podcast last week is my exempling that I was actually doing things on my end rather than talking about them. So do not talk. An example of that principle, being a steward of my brothers and my freighters when their strength is tapped, being that strong arm when someone else feels like they're being forced to kneel, needing to devoutly, needing to not just devote, but having to move my time, my powers, my awareness, my resources, financially, energetically, temporal time, my intention, all of my intentional work here, having to reroute all of that to do what needed to be done here in this moment. That is the core of this little magical lesson, along with a reminder to never be overcome by doubt, by that crushing weight of despair that can sometimes come in even at the strongest occultists, the edges of our minds, that fear that's really this overburdening ineffectuality, a hopelessness. Because yes, even I, watching the places I played and thrived in as a child, the glorious groves of Sequoia, of Semperviron, some older than the Nazarene, than Jesus, some as old as Muhammad, Watching these huge, powerful, silently proud, majestic, ever-present, towering sentinels over humanity. Those redwoods that first inspired me and thousands of others towards a love of ancient lore, of land, of nature, of earth and science, of rationality and biology. Watching the watchers of my childhood burn away to hollow shells, to ash. Sensing on top of that as short-term stewards only, which is what we are, within our own vessels and of this rock that we're on, with responsibility to each other and to the resources being generated here on a physical manifested plane, feeling at a gut level that this was a moment of failure made manifest that I was witnessing. That this, in my lifetime, was an experience of watching what we were meant to hold and trust for each other disappear. Knowing that not for 10,000 years. Even if everything were to start to go right tomorrow, it'll be 10,000 years before those who come after me will even have the chance to know that place as I was able to know it, when it was magnificent and lush and noble. To have to be here present to experience that as part of my life journey in this shared history, in humanity's shared history, seeing these entities that have long been a touchstone of my own personal past, but also are the coastal redwood forests of California are a deep touchstone of more than one type of temple. That this respite of calm, almost unfathomable natural splendor, entities, energetic powers, 300 feet tall, with bones as old as the hills' spines, blood as royal, as rich as the noblest man could ever even begin to hope to embody. The doubt and the fear of watching something like that destroy the destruction of it, and of having to be alive in that moment to watch it, to watch life forces like that burn away to nothing, to be able to do nothing but watch. There was a dangerous amount of consuming hopelessness abounding energetically. It's a dangerous thing. It's a thing that could threaten anyone's spirit. I felt my own threatened. I watched men, 70-year-old men, mountain men, hard men, more than homesteaders. These are forest men, druids in their own right, with deep knowledge and deep connections to their communities, just weeping and tears just smearing ashes on their faces. Seeing something like that is going to threaten even the most depolarized occultist. It's going to threaten your ability to remain energetically balanced. But despair, fear, doubt, that is not the occultist way, the Magi's way. It doesn't serve us as practicing magicians. It doesn't serve anyone else either. Is it humbling? Is it terrifying to be here experiencing this as part of our life's journey on this manifested physical plane? Yes, it is. Is it frightening to watch strong communities rich with their own history and traditions all reduced almost instantaneously to shells? To watch my own childhood home reduced to a barren wasteland. Such a seeming waste of people's lives, of energy, of resources, of light transformed. Is it frightening? Yes, but that is a dangerous thing to give way to or to give into. That kind of despair, that can be right at the edges, the outreaches, say, of the mind or the mentality of the practicing occultist in a difficult position when everything seems darkest. It's right there creeping around the edges, just hoping for the chance to get in and take over. And that is not the way of magic. That is not the occultist's way. We must watch. We do not look away. We might want to weep when we see sword ferns the size of men that have been there for 72 years disappear in 10 seconds. But we stand back up and we do it so that we serve ourselves, our own evolution, and so that we serve those to the right and left of us. We take what lessons we must and find a way to let even what might seem to be the worst possible thing or the most difficult, impossible obstacle, we find how we allow for it to become the inspiration that evolves us, that progresses us on our path, that serves us, that makes us even better, even stronger, even less likely to be overcome or unbalanced by polarizing forces. That is our way. That is the way of the night. That is the way of magic. To not become the hate or despair. To not be subsumed by passions or irrationalities. To not leap with anxiety at sudden joys or sudden woes. But to steer the ship steady, depolarized, on as true a course as we may. And yes, a lot of egregore power has been lost in these forests recently. And there is a lot of rebuilding to be done in this particular state. So, this week's little YouTube podcast, magical lesson, I suppose. Talk less about what you are and example it instead. Because I haven't spent 2 weeks talking about occultism to those around me. I spent 2 weeks being an occultist for those around me. Talk less about what you think and what you are, and be what you think and be what you are, even if sometimes that requires being silent. And be always aware of polarizing energies, both without and within, because they are dangerous, even to the most experienced of us, when we even for a moment lose awareness of them. Despair serves no one, including the self. In the most vulnerable moments, when the most is required of the wise, that is the time that any magician can least afford to indulge in it, and things like despair. Not while there's work to be done, and there is work to be done. Until next time.